Good evening, Mayor, council members, and Fullerton's public. My name is Mike Gennaco, and I am here to present the results of OIR Group's systemic review of the Fullerton Police Department. Approximately a year ago, you asked us to conduct an internal affairs investigation into the incident involving the eventual demise of Kelly Thomas to determine whether any officers committed misconduct on July 5th, 2011, the day that Kelly Thomas was grievously injured, which led to his demise a few days later. The internal affairs investigation was completed and recommendations were sent to Acting Chief of Police Dan Hughes for disposition and action. While I can't comment specifically on much of that investigation, I can reiterate that that investigation is completed against 3 additional officers relating to excessive force and failure to render aid, and found insufficient evidence to establish a violation of policy with regard to those 2 issues. The investigation did find other violations of policy with regard to those officers, but nothing sufficient to sustain termination. In addition, the city requested us to systemically examine the Fullerton Police Department. The report that I speak to this evening is the product of that examination and review. The report first looks at issues that come directly out of the Kelly Thomas tragedy itself. It concludes that the use of force that came out of that incident never needed to occur in the first place. The report concludes that officers who were better oriented towards dealing with Mr. Thomas could have resolved the matter without resorting to significant force or any force, as had been done numerous times in the past. The most tragic aspect of this whole case, in our view, was that the force that was used on Mr. Thomas that led to his death did not need to happen and could well have been resolved as most FPD officers resolve their citizen contacts every day without a use of force. The report credits FPD for recognizing the need to provide further training to each of its officers and provide them skills on dealing with the mentally ill. The report also credits the department for finally dedicating another full-time officer to dealing with the homeless. However, our recommendations push the department to increase that dedication so there is seamless coverage and that on every shift there is an officer specially trained and oriented in dealing with the homeless. Most importantly, we recommend that everyone on the department, including trainees and in-service officers, regularly ride with the homeless liaison officers, including command staff as well. The report discusses and criticizes other issues directly coming out of the Kelly Thomas incident, including uneven and poor performance on turning on the digital audio recorders by many of the responding officers to the incident, the failure of a referral to the district attorney until 2 days later, the exposure of the videotape to officers in groups prior to writing their reports, the fact that instead of interviewing officers, the decision was made to allow them to write police reports, and the timing, submission, and editing of those reports, some of them haven't not being received and entered into the system until several days after the incident. The report also discusses the department's response to the Kelly Thomas incident and is critical that there was no apparent plan on how to provide information to the public. As indicated in our interim report released in February, while we found no evidence of any intent to mislead, some of the information that was released proved to be inaccurate. More importantly, the information that was released could have and was interpreted as information solely favorable to the officers. And most importantly still, in those days when the incident was going viral, no one at the department ever stepped forward to express public condolences for the actions of its officers and the fatal injuries suffered by Kelly Thomas. There are ways to express those sympathies without admitting, quote, fault, but FPD did not find a way to express those sympathies in the ensuing days. The report then goes on to discuss issues coming out of our broader review of force incidents and disciplinary cases apart from the Kelly Thomas case. We looked at policies and training regarding use of force, distraction strikes, foot pursuits, and the use of the taser. We also looked at how the department has investigated and reviewed force incidents in the past and offer a number of recommendations on how to improve those protocols. We speak to how the department has unevenly imposed discipline in the past and offer recommendations designed for robust and consistent accountability. While we found much room for improvement, the status quo on each of these issues did not significantly depart from our review of similarly sized law enforcement organizations. Our recommendations, if effectively implemented, are not intended to set a floor for the Fullerton Department, but intended to place FPD in a higher percentile compared to similarly positioned police agencies, and we hope that FPD is committed to endeavoring to achieve that level of excellence. While we certainly took note of FPD employees who have violated the public's trust by committing crimes and violating policy, we found no culture of corruption and found rather than FPD leadership move to hold personnel accountable who had committed such crimes. We did, however, find evidence in the past that there had developed a culture of complacency in which former leaders of the FPD may not have used sufficient exacting scrutiny or placed sufficiently high demands on its people and holding them accountable sufficiently when they transgressed. Our review examines one recent advance in transparency, that being the department's decision to place its policy manual online for all to see, but recommends that it find other ways to provide more information to its public about force investigations and the internal investigative and disciplinary processes. Finally, our review is intended to start a dialogue on the possibility of independent oversight and how an auditing model could help ensure thorough investigations, principled decision-making, and appropriate accountability without taking away the fundamental responsibility of department leaders to hold their people accountable. As a result, we offer a total of 59 recommendations designed to improve the way FPD does business in these areas. We also would be remiss not to spend a few minutes talking about how we have been received by the department and the internal reforms that have occurred since we began our review. From the outset, we were provided unfettered access to documents that form the basis of our findings. And also, rather than wait for us to complete our work, department leadership began their own internal review of policies and protocols and did take some immediate steps to identify issues, such as sending all of their officers to crisis intervention training and refining policies and procedures. Throughout our report, we include discussion of that progress that FPD has made over the past year. Those observations have caused us to conclude that the FPD that existed on July 5th, 2011 is not the department of today. Changed leadership, introspection, and reform has placed the department in an upward trajectory. Is there more to be done? Yes, a whole heck of a lot more. And that is the purpose of our recommendations. However, because of what the department has already done, we are optimistic that our recommendations will spark continued reform and continue to move the department forward in a positive direction. I appreciate the opportunity to present our report to you this evening,